pestilence.
What added,
No doubt,
to my hatred of the beast was the discovery on the morning after I brought it home that, like Pluto, it had also been deprived of one of its eyes.
With my aversion to this cat, however, its partiality for me seemed to increase.
it followed my footsteps with a pertinacity which it would be difficult to make you comprehend. Whenever I sat, it would crouch beneath my chair or spring upon my knees, covering me with its loathsome caresses.
If I rose to walk, it would get between my feet and thus nearly throw me down, or fastening its long and sharp claws in my dress, clamber in this manner to my breast. At such times,
Although I longed to destroy it with a blow,
I was yet withheld from doing so, partly by the memory of my former crime, but chiefly
Let me confess it at once.
by
absolute dread of the beast.
I am almost ashamed to own.
Yes, even in this felon's cell.
I am almost ashamed to own.
that the terror and horror with which the animal inspired me had been heightened by one of the merest chimeras it would be possible to conceive.
The character of the white mark,
Of which I have spoken,
and which constituted the sole difference between the strange beast and the one I had destroyed had,
by slow degrees,
By degrees nearly imperceptible,
and for which a long time my reason struggled to reject as fanciful,
it had at length assumed a rigorous distinctness of outline.
it was now the representation of an object that I shudder to name.
And for this, above all, I loathed and dreaded, and would have rid myself of the monster had I dared.
It was now, I say, the image of a hideous,
of a ghastly thing,
Of the gallows.
Oh,
mournful and terrible engine of horror,
and of crime,
of agony,
and of death.
Beneath the pressure of torments such as this, the feeble remnant of good within me succumbed. Evil thoughts became my sole intimates. The moodiness of my usual temper increased to hatred of all things and of all mankind, while, from the sudden, frequent, and ungovernable outburst of a fury to which I now abandoned myself, my uncomplaining life of
Lass was the most usual and most patient of sufferers.
One day my wife accompanied me upon some household errand into the cellar of the old building which our poverty compelled us to inhabit. The cat followed me down the steep stairs, and nearly throwing me headlong,
Exasperated me to madness.
uplifting an axe, I aimed a blow at the animal which would have proved instantly fatal had it descended as I wished. But this blow was arrested by the hand of my wife.
Goaded
by the interference
into a rage more than demoniacal, I withdrew my arm from her grasp and buried the axe in her brain.
She fell dead.
Upon the spot.
Without a groan.
This hideous murder accomplished, I set myself forthwith
And with entire deliberation,
to the task of concealing the body.
I knew I could not remove it from the house, either by day or by night, without the risk of being observed by the neighbors.
Many projects entered my mind.
at one period, I thought of cutting the corpse into minute fragments and destroying them by fire.
At another, I resolved to dig a grave for it in the floor of the cellar,
Again, I deliberated about casting it in the well in the yard,
about packing it in a box,
As if merchandise.
with the usual arrangements.
and so getting a porter to take it from the house.
Finally, I hit upon what I considered a far better expedient than either of these.
I determined to wall it up in the cellar.
For a purpose such as this, the cellar was well adapted.
By means of a crowbar, I easily dislodged the bricks and, having carefully deposited the body against the inner wall, I propped it in that position, while I relaid the whole wall as it originally stood.
When I had finished, I felt satisfied that all was right. The wall did not present the slightest appearance of having been disturbed.
The rubbish on the floor was picked up with the minutest care. I looked around triumphantly and said to myself,
Here, at least then,
My labor has not been in vain.
my next step was to look for the beast which had been the cause of so much wretchedness.
For I had firmly resolved to put it to death.
It did not make its appearance during the night.
and thus, for one night at least, since its introduction into the house, I soundly and tranquilly slept.
Aye, slept even with the burden of murder on my soul.
The second and third day passed, and still my tormentor came not. Once again I breathed as a free man. The monster in terror had fled the premises forever.
I should behold it no more.
My happiness was supreme.
Upon the fourth day of the assassination, a party of the police came into the house and proceeded to make rigorous investigation of the premises.
Secure, however, in the inscrutability of my place of concealment, I felt no embarrassment whatever.
The officers bade me accompany them in their search. They left no nook or corner unexplored. At length, they descended into the cellar.
I quivered not in a muscle. My heart beat calmly as that of one who slumbers in innocence. I folded my arms upon my bosom and roamed easily to and fro. The police were thoroughly satisfied and prepared to depart.
The glee in my heart was too strong to be restrained. I burned to say if but one word by way of triumph.
Gentlemen, I delight to have allayed your suspicions. I wish you all health and a little more courtesy. By the by, gentlemen, this is a very well-constructed house.
In the rapid desire to say something easily, I scarcely knew what I uttered at all.
I may say an excellently well-constructed house. These walls... Are you going, gentlemen? These walls are solidly put together.
And here, through the mere frenzy of bravado, I rapped heavily with the cane which I held in my hand upon that very portion of the brickwork behind which stood the corpse of the wife of my bosom.
No sooner had the reverberation of my blows sunk into silence than I was answered by a voice from within the tomb,
By a cry, at first muffled and broken,
like the sobbing of a child.
and then quickly swelling into one long, loud, and continuous scream.
A howl,
A wailing shriek,
half of horror,
and half of triumph.
Such as might have arisen only out of hell.
For one instant, the party on the stairs remained motionless.
In the next, a dozen stout arms were toiling at the wall. It fell bodily.
The corpse, already greatly decayed and clotted with gore, stood erect before the eyes of the spectators.
Upon its head,
With red extended mouth and solitary eye of fire,
sat the hideous beast whose craft had seduced me into murder.
and whose informing voice had consigned me to the hangman.
I had walled the monster up within the tomb.